Guys, we're in the studio today, and you know what's on our mind right now, as should be on your mind, I mean, all the time, I feel like, is wealth building. I think that real estate, the reason I'm in real estate is because it truly does, in my opinion, provide the best vehicle for wealth in not only our country, but really worldwide. And I know you and I kind of like shared that sentiment even before we got into real estate.
Yeah. Well, like you said, that's exactly the reason I got into real estate. And I love talking about this conversation because I think that as real estate professionals, we have this ability to not only create wealth for ourselves, but we have this really unique ability to help others create it in such a selfless kind of way.
Yep. Yeah. Do you find that are you surprised? I mean, we've both been in this business now for a while. Are you surprised that still it seems that agents don't think this way?
It does. And I guess the proof of that is how many successful real estate agents don't own any real estate other than their primary residence. And I look at that and I say to myself, with your active income, and with your ability to see these listings before they even come on the market, you have the market knowledge, you understand comps, you understand value. Why not take your knowledge base of owning real estate to the next level, not only for yourself again, but for your clients? And so it does surprise me that more people aren't choosing to sort of practice what they preach and park their own money into what they know. And
I think especially in the landscape that we find ourselves in today with competition just at an all-time high, right? Like it's important to have these types of tools in your toolbox, understand these conversations so that you can differentiate yourself for your client. Because if I don't have these types of conversations, why not just go to a computer and get, a number spit out and work with a service like that? You know what I mean?
Exactly. That totally makes sense. It's part of the value we can offer 1,000%. And it's like, it's basically just like the education piece, right? If you can help somebody understand why investing in real estate is a good place to park their money, long-term, short-term, depending on their goals, then you become obviously hugely valuable in their eyes.
Yeah, right? I definitely agree. So let's kind of then, I think we should just talk kind of building blocks wise, elementary wise, on some of these concepts and start, people down this path of thinking through, okay, how is the wealth building conversation inside real estate beneficial for my clients? How can I build business based on this conversation?
Right. And I think it's something to get out of the way right up front is we're not just talking about professional real estate investors here, right? When we're talking about clients, and when you're saying that, David, you're not just talking about people who have, given themselves the label, I'm a professional real estate investor. We're talking about your family members, your friends, the people in your database who own real estate. In this market, obviously, prices are through the roof right now, which means that equity, right? Valuations and appraisals are through the roof. So with that equity, well, what do you do with it, right? So I just want to I could preface the conversation with this is applicable to everybody, whether it's a first-time home buyer, right, that's currently renting, or somebody owns a property that has equity, or somebody that does actively know that they want to build wealth. This is sort of a universal conversation.
Yeah. And this might not be the right place to bring this up, except it hit me just now. Opportunity is always everywhere. And yet specific opportunities, I think there's a window to, right? And windows close. And even in this conversation, you said, not professional investors, just day-to-day clients. And high-level agents who understand conversations like this and how to leverage real estate for their clients, they've seen different opportunities out there. For example, this is where I'm going. We're seeing some changes in the second home mortgage industry right now, where second home rates are actually coming more in alignment with investment real estate mortgages. And one of the reasons that I'm hearing from all of our lender partners is because of so many consumers or so many agents helping their consumer leverage second home vacation vacation home loans
Right.
for short-term investment real estate.
Exactly.
Right. And so there's this window of opportunity where, you know, a lot of people have been able to get a lot more real estate for a lot less money down. And that may be going away. And so I think it's just important to stay well versed in these things, you know, as time goes on.
Yeah, that was a perfect spot for that. So let's go back to your question. Where do you kind of get started? And I think what would make sense is for us to go over some basic terms, right? Like, what do we need to know as real estate professionals to be able to even start the conversation, or at least to know what do I need to go learn as a consultant so that I can be the best consultant?
Right.
And so we talk about some basic terms, right? So the first thing is appreciation, which I think we all basically understand. Appreciation is the rate at which, you know, the value of houses goes up over time. And this is simply based on comparable sales, and it's obviously influenced by a lot of things like inflation and interest rates and supply and demand, right? The type of market you're in. But the whole idea is, well, this year, at the beginning of the year, a house in this neighborhood that was this size and this condition sold for $500,000, and throughout the course of the year, it crept up to $510,000 to $515,000, and people were spending more and more money for similar houses as time goes on. That's simple appreciation. So what's important to note here is that the national average, David, historically, in if we're looking at the last 50 years, is somewhere in the 3 to 5% range across the country. But as we know, the last 2 to 3 years, those numbers have been skyrocketed. Like in Scottsdale, we're experiencing 15 or 20% annual appreciation in properties. And you know that because you take what did it sell for now, how much did they buy it for 2 or 3 years ago, and that difference as a percentage is the appreciation rate.
Oh yeah, and I don't really see it slowing too much. It's certainly not going to go back down to the 4% in the next year. May not be up in the 18-20%, but I mean, the fact of the matter is clients out there are going to continue to accumulate equity in this appreciating market. And so that's another term. I mean, let's just define equity. What's equity?
Yeah, and well, you have your value of the property, right, which is changing as we know over time. Equity is just the difference between what it's worth and what's owed on the property. So take your first mortgage. If there's a second or third mortgage, you add those up, and the difference between what's owed and what it's valued at is equity. Now, the interesting thing about equity that a lot of people know is that you can borrow equity against your own house as a loan from the bank. So, for example, if my property is worth $500,000, I owe $200,000, then I have $300,000 in equity. Pretty simple math so far. Most banks, or some banks, will lend up to 70, 80, sometimes even 90% of that equity back to you. That loan is secured by the asset itself, which means if you don't pay back, they get your house. So therefore, make sure you're investing that money in something important or something that you know, like real estate. So what a lot of people will choose to do is, and I'm getting maybe a little ahead of myself here, but they'll choose to borrow that equity against their own house. As you know, right now, interest rates are extraordinarily low. So I borrow it at 3% basically from myself, right, from the bank against my own house. And then I take that money and I use that as a down payment on another property that's going to give me a better than 3% return.
Exactly.
And now I'm making the spread.
Yeah. So, okay. Accessing this, appreciation. Everyone's screaming at the consumer out there. Your home is worth, it's an all-time high. The market's at an all-time high. Your home is worth way more. Do you have any thoughts on how agents should communicate to cut through that noise? Because I think, people out there, sellers are hearing that left and right. And so in this conversation, how do we differentiate ourselves to tell the consumer that, but in a different way? Well,
you're right, because what everybody's hearing, to your point, is prices are through the roof. You should be selling. You should consider selling. And they're all saying, well, where am I going to go? But if we modified the message to don't sell, let's maximize the equity because of this market so that you can double down and triple down on your investments. Because guess what happens when you own 3 investment properties? They're all 3 simultaneously earning appreciation. They're all 3 simultaneously having their mortgages paid down, right? We call that debt pay down, or paying your mortgage, which means that over time, you're creating more and more equity, now times 3 properties or 4 properties or 5 properties, domino effect.
Right. And I think that changes the message from one that results in fear, where am I going to go, to one that results in what's in it for them. Opportunity.
Right.
Exactly.
Holy smokes. So you mean that my equity that's just sitting there, I use this term, it's dead money. It's just unutilized money. So it's not hurting you, it's not helping you. It's just nothing.
It just is.
But if
right.
you borrowed at 3% and get anything better than a 3% return, then your money is now working for you.
100%. And to your point, even if you're only talking one or two different properties, you think about, okay, 15% appreciation over the last couple of years. When you own 2-3 properties, we're talking the opportunity to become a millionaire very, very quickly. I heard someone say the other day, someone said, I want to be a millionaire. And the person said, go out and buy $1 million worth of real estate. And instantly the question is, how do I do that? Like, I can't do that. I can't qualify for that amount of loans. Well, you do exactly what we're saying right here.
100%. And here's, in my opinion, the secret. Or it's actually not a secret to anybody who's wealthy, but anybody that owns real estate, this is actually not a secret at all. Why I love the idea of investing in real estate is because unlike any other investment, you only have to make a down payment. So when we're talking about 10% return on your money, we're not talking about 10% return on your $10,000. We're talking about a 10% return if that's the appreciation and if that's your cash on cash return of the entire asset. So if I use a traditional investment loan, let's say, that's going to require a 25% down payment. So let me just use easy numbers. Let's use $400,000. $400,000 property, 25% down is $100,000. But my 10% annual appreciation is not on $100,000, it's on all $400,000. So if you do that math, that would be $40,000 a year, right? So the idea is that in theory, assuming nothing else changes, you're earning $40,000 a year in appreciation that's unrealized, meaning you don't get the money until you either sell or refinance. But that idea is if I can put $100,000, like the question is if you could put in $100,000 and earn $40,000 a year, would that be a good investment? And the answer is, well, of course it would be.
100%. So when you're advising, when we're advising buyers and sellers, should we be, how should we be positioning appreciation, right? Not all markets do appreciate as fast. And historically, history would tell us that we're not going to always stay in this type of market. And so how do we temper the conversation around appreciation, do you think?
Well, that's a great question. And what we really have to dig into first and foremost is their desire to buy and their ability to let this money sit, which is why we always start with motivation with a client. And we want to understand what is your long-term goal and short-term goal. Because to your point, David, appreciation and the value of property is not always going up. Now, in the last decade, it's pretty much been going up, right? Since the 2008 recession, like we've been pretty solid.
Since we were born.
Since you and I have been in real estate. And that's true.
Right.
That's an important point because a lot of real estate agents have only been in an appreciating market.
Exactly.
So we have to be careful not to over-promise to our clients that there's no way you could ever lose money because we obviously know that's not true. But here's the thing. The people typically that lose money when they sell real estate, it's because they have to sell. They have to sell at the bottom of a market. But if you had bought in 2006, I like to use this example, at the height of the market, and then 2009, 10, 11 rolled around and you had to sell, well, you probably lost money. But if you did not have to sell, let's assume it's a rental property getting a decent monthly cash flow, or you're even just breaking even, right? And then you were able to survive and climb out and you were to make it to today, I think it's a pretty fair guesstimate that if you bought a house in 2006, you could sell it for a lot more money in 2022. So that's where you're at. So the idea is that you want to make sure that you're buying investment properties that you're not going to end up in a position where you have to sell it because depending on the market, you may have to wait it out a couple more years.
100%. I mean, if you're in a position to hold on to an asset, especially over a 10-year horizon, history would tell us you're in a very safe spot.
Because remember what's happening, David, during that 10-year period, appreciation's happening, but even regardless of appreciation, your debt is being paid down, either because you're living there and paying your own mortgage or because your renters are paying you more than what that monthly mortgage is. So the debt is going down. And so then again, I just wanted to reemphasize that. That's where the equity piece comes in. Then from that, you simply subtract the cost of selling the asset, right? Real estate commissions, unless you're a real estate agent. And then maybe you're paying, just a buyer agent. And then that's your profit from that asset.
How do we, let's talk a little bit about objections, right? We're versed in real estate. We have this conversation every single day, and yet the buyers and sellers that we're talking to may not be, right? And oftentimes aren't. That's kind of the whole topic of today.
Yeah.
We're educating these people. What are some of the most common objections that agents are going to get from someone who is just being introduced to these concepts?
It's definitely going to be that they're not familiar enough with the process. They don't know what they're doing. And to that, I would just say, competence leads to confidence.
Well, that's the
education piece.
Responsibility.
Like, I am so confident in investing in real estate because I study it, I practice it, I've helped other people do it, I've done it now. So I can make a pretty good judgment call most of the time and feel confident with myself. 5 years ago, I wasn't confident in buying a real estate investment property because I knew nothing about the process. So to your point, David, our clients, most of our database falls into that category. So that's a huge opportunity. And I now get to create conversations and content and, perhaps even just email or newsletters that outline some of this information. I can go research and understand and interpret the market and break it down and explain it to somebody in a much more simple way that they're going to understand. And that's going to start leading to their confidence.
Definitely. But Joe, I don't want to be a landlord. My client doesn't want to be a landlord.
Well, David, you're somebody that I happen to know has maximized the use of property management companies, especially because I know you like to, or you've at least invested in properties out of state. You're not even there to see the property. So I'd like to turn that question right back to you.
Hey, perfect. So I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions that exists. I mean, I just opened up an email yesterday, and it was my property manager letting me know that some water got into the basement of one of my properties 2 months ago. And basically the email said, hey, no worries. Everything's all taken care of. I just wanted you to be aware. Yeah. And I thought that was just a perfect example of when you have the right team in place, that becomes something that's not a worry. Now, to be fair, I only have long-term rentals. I don't hold anything short-term, Airbnb, whatever. So I'd be speaking outside of my expertise. But when it comes to a long-term rental, once you have very clear expectations drawn out with a property manager, you truly should be in a position where you have to make very few decisions on that property throughout the course of the year. And that's been my experience. And again, short time horizon, right? I've only owned my own investment real estate for a few years now. And yet we're getting to the point where I am more and more confident with saying to people, as long as you have the right property manager in place, and there's criteria. We could spend a whole episode just talking about the criteria of selecting a good property manager. But that shouldn't be something that keeps someone back. And you should be able to educate, and you should have a property manager on speed dial. So when that comes up, you can say to your client, hey, how about we just have this conversation with a trusted advisor?
Now, let me go to the other end of that spectrum, because there's the other approach, which is I'm going to personally manage all my own properties. Now, some people aren't going to have the time or the energy or the desire to do that, and that's what you just touched on. But some people will actually get a bigger return by providing some active income, actively working on the investment. So if you are willing to spend some time, and if you have the time, and if you can make some more money, some people would gladly manage their own 20 units, 30 units, 40 units, and they save a couple of $100 a month, and they basically are just paying themselves for that time. So it's not an approach I personally would take. I like your approach a lot better, but I just want to throw it out there. There's some people that choose to take that approach, especially on something like an Airbnb where it's higher turnover. If it's like let's say a young couple lives in a duplex, they live in one side together, they're growing their family, and they own the other side of the duplex. Well, that would be very easy once a weekend to walk across, down the stairs and over to the next unit and make sure the sheets are clean before the next tenant. So it depends again on what are your goals and desires with this property. How much time do you have to give to it? How much money do you want to earn from it? And you can go several different directions.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about, we talked about appreciation, we talked about debt pay down, we talked about equity, we defined all of those things. We didn't really touch on tax advantages, and that is clearly another huge aspect of investing in real estate. I mean, when you think about how the wealthy continue to get wealthier, it's in this right here.
Totally.
And I do not like when people call them loopholes, because the tax code is specifically written by our government to incentivize real estate investing.
100%. And real estate ownership. They want people to take ownership and pride in their properties. And that's such a good point to start this conversation with. First and foremost, as far as real estate tax advantages go, well, quick disclaimer, we're not professional, blah, blah, blah.
Not a CPA.
Not CPAs, tax advisors. The first thing I say is every expense that you have that's actually directly related to that investment property is going to be a tax write-off. So if I have to spend money on getting, it published to find a tenant, or if I'm doing a background check, or I have to fix the hot water heater, all of those expenses are going to be deducted from my annual gross income, and the net income is what I'll get taxed on. So that's important to note first and foremost. Additionally, David, the biggest tax advantage that I see people forgetting or not knowing to take advantage of is depreciation. And so the way that this works in a nutshell is that you have to take the value of the improvements of the asset. So if you're in real estate, you know that the value of an asset is based on two things: land and then the improvements, the house itself. So we cannot depreciate land, right? That's just dirt. We can't do that. But the IRS says that we can depreciate the improvements, the actual building, the structure itself. And so you take the value of that asset, which, by the way, your county does this on your taxes for you every year. That's how they determine how much tax you're going to pay every year.
Yep.
This valuation that I'm describing, and then they calculate it based on a mill rate for that town. What I'm getting to is that you take the value of that improvement, and over the course of 27 and a half years, each year on your income tax return, you can depreciate that value of the asset. And so what this ends up looking like on your tax return is it's not going to be a credit, meaning the IRS isn't going to pay you $8,000, but it's going to reduce the amount of taxable income you're being taxed on.
The liability that you have.
Yep, exactly. And so you can spread that out over 27 and a half years. Your mind should have just been blown, and you should be communicating to your clients about this. Yeah, and I think that everybody, I encourage the listeners, if they're going to go start having these conversations, hey, build your bench of team, right? Like, who is the tax advisor or the tax preparer or the CPA that you can actually connect your clients with? Who is the resource that you can make sure that you're going to make sure that you know what you're talking about before you even have these conversations, so you can explain it more in depth. So that's where the initiative and sort of the responsibility as a consultant comes in. There's obviously no requirement to do this, but the very first thing you said is, how do you separate yourself from all the noise? How do you separate yourself from all the other real estate agents in the market? Well, you do it by adding more and better value. And I think that this is one giant way to do that. Totally is. So let's talk tactical action a little bit. Okay. Obviously, we want people to go out and take action right away. And there's a myriad of different things that they could do. Where does an agent start in being able to help more people on this side of the business or with this value pillar? Self-education has to be number one. I mean, you have to know what you're talking about. Keller Williams, for me, David, introduced me to a lot of these concepts and ideas, and I took them and I ran with them. All that means is I went on the Google machine and researched real estate appreciation. What does that mean? Show me statistics. Show me data. Depreciation. What does that mean? I read like literally pages from the IRS tax code, which is not the most thrilling. Oh, that's good bedtime. Yeah, puts you right to sleep. But the idea is you've got to take the initiative and just go, again, just what I said a minute ago, go build your team of resources and have lunches with them, have conversations and meetings with them, and pick their brains and get as much knowledge as you can. I think that has to be number one, David. Everything after that becomes very easy. If I have the knowledge and if I know what I'm talking about, it's very easy for me to strike up a conversation with a friend, or to even put together an email or a social media post talking about these things, because I'm not selling anything other than the ability for them to learn how to build their own wealth. Yeah. I think I agree with you. And I'm also convinced, very similar to how, I've said before to agents, and agents have said to me, like, hey, we who are in real estate, we should be required to, go through the home buying process or home selling process like every few years, just so we can like put ourselves in the shoes of, what our clients are experiencing. And I kind of look at it the same way with investment real estate. Like, I don't think anything makes you more lethal or more valuable than when you've actually just gone and done this yourself. And so I think it goes part and parcel with education.
build your confidence, build your ability to talk to other consumers about this, you've got to go do it yourself. And can you do it without investing in real estate yourself? Sure. Do you become, again, more valuable and lethal? Yes, I think you do when you actually go and do it.
Yeah, 1,000%. So that would really be the first step, is that self-education piece. From there, if you're looking at doing something for yourself, I think the next step is really to identify your search criteria. And I kind of pivoted that direction, David, because even if you're helping a client, this isn't for you, that's still the next step. You have to help them identify their search criteria. They haven't thought all of this through necessarily. And when I say search criteria, I mean, well, first of all, what kind of real estate are we buying? Are we talking about residential, multifamily, commercial, land, industrial? What type of real estate are we most comfortable with? And that's going to depend a lot on your own personal expertise, assuming you're guiding your client. Where do you want it to be in your backyard to where you can go visit? Do you specifically want it out of state to where you don't even have to go see it and you're going to hire a property management company? So there's some variables in there. Obviously, budget is something that we're going to want to consider. How much money do you want to play with? And here's my approach to that. I started small and I earned my way to bigger numbers. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I'm saying when I'm personally buying my first couple flips, David, they were $150,000 properties. I mean, I wasn't going out and starting with $1 million project. Now, if I've been selling real estate for 20 years and I specialize in luxury real estate and I have the capital to bankroll that project, I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'm just saying the higher the number, the bigger the risk. So start simple. If you're wanting to dip your toes in this, start with a simple, $150,000, $200,000 condo or small single family. That's not a total teardown, right?
Well, and a lot of that goes back to motivation, which we already talked about, and also being knowledgeable about your client. Like, because you're a fiduciary, it's your responsibility to have some idea of the financial position that they're in,
right?
So that you can help guide them.
Right.
If you're talking to someone who's just starting a brand new job, has 2 young kids, living on one income, and you advise them this way, that might not be the best advisement to go buy $1 million property.
Right. I literally tell agents, you don't have the right to advise people until you understand thoroughly their entire situation. Like, you can't just be like, hey, you want to invest in real estate? You should do it this way. That's crazy because of everything you just said. So that's huge.
Very cool. All right. So we've got education, some search criteria.
That goes right into financing, honestly. How are you going to pay for this? And there's so many different ways. We could spend several conversations, and we've talked about this in the past on some episodes. We talk about traditional financing, or conventional financing could be part of it. Investment financing, owner financing. I love definitely hard money, private money. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it. So again, whether it's you or a client, how are you going to finance this? If you're thinking about pulling equity, I obviously love that. The next step is to go talk to your bank or talk to the client's lender and say, hey, I want to do an appraisal. I want to see how much equity I have. What percentage of equity are you guys willing to lend me, and at what rate? And then you take that amount of money at that rate, you plug it into your deal analyzer for this next project that you're looking at, and you make sure you can get a positive return.
Talking about financing, we need to get Pace Morby on the show. Pace, if you hear this, you need to come on our show and talk sub 2.
Okay.
Sub 2 is just something. Pace is here in town, and he does all his deals creatively using sub 2, where he's just essentially taking over the existing mortgage. And the guy's brilliant.
I love
absolutely
it.
Brilliant.
I love it. Great strategy.
Awesome. What else we got? We got anything else? I mean, education, search criteria, financing. I mean, I think we've kind of covered a lot.
Yeah, I mean that would be a good place to get started. I think again for yourself, think about your business as it stands right now. Where are the opportunities that you could start plugging this in? What are the opportunities that you're currently overlooking in your business? Whether it's going on a listing appointment or, a business networking event, what are you already doing that this can start becoming part of your conversation with people, so you can sort of start cutting your teeth and practicing the way that you bring up this idea of investing in real estate and borrowing equity and just really sharpening your skills on being able to effectively communicate the benefits.
Totally. I'm bringing a group through a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I know a lot of our listeners have probably read it. In there, he talks about specific knowledge versus general knowledge. And he reminds us that knowledge of, anything is really valueless in terms of money until it is organized specifically and then given to someone else. Okay. And so I think the reason I bring that up here is because the more and more that agents can specialize and have specialized knowledge, the more and more they're going to be set apart from the competition. And so as we continue to get more and more competitive in this landscape, I think it's imperative that you dive into these type of specialties. It doesn't mean that it becomes your entire client base,
right?
But it means that you have that tool in your toolbox to go after the person who this could work well for.
Right. And let me just expand on that, David, because you and I know people that have built an enormous business on doing fix and flips. We know people that have built an enormous business buying and refinancing single family homes. We know people that have done multifamily, commercial, mobile home parks. We know people that have specialized in Section 8 housing. There are so many different niches you could dive into. You really do, again, ask yourself, what am I already doing in my business? What would I like my niche to be? And to your point, it doesn't have to be all you do, but the more defined you can get, the more you're going to attract the people that are interested in that product.
Certainly.
Which goes right into database segmentation.
There we go. On next week's episode. Love it, man. Well, I hope this has been helpful to you guys. Wealth building through real estate is so awesome to talk about. If you haven't left us a rating and review on iTunes, it's more important than ever that you go and do that on Apple. We love you guys. Love bringing you valuable content each and every week.
One more quick thing, David. If you guys have any questions about this whole topic, feel free to reach out to David or I directly. We will at least be happy and able to point you in the right direction if you have any specific questions or needs.
100%. Let's go buy property together.
And even better.
There we go. Hey, guys, this has been another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play All In.
Hey, guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play all in.